Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. I want you to close your eyes for just a second and picture the dark desert. You hear the pounding of ancient war drums, sand is blowing across these massive dunes. We are heading straight back into ancient Egypt. Now, when most of us think of ancient Egypt, we immediately picture pyramids, right? Unimaginable piles of gold, those giant statues of cats, and of course, some truly monumental egos. Well, today we're focusing on one specific guy whose ego was so magnificent, so absolutely colossal, that he literally defined an entire era of human history. Just imagine being a ruler for a second. You're staring down the terrifying, brutal prospect of ancient warfare, and your response is just those two simple words: sounds fun. Because that was Ramses. He was a conqueror who didn't just carry the burden of war, he met it with this unshakable enthusiasm that honestly must have absolutely baffled the people around him. He didn't see a geopolitical crisis. He saw the ultimate stage to prove how great he was.
Section 1. Meet the confident pharaoh.
So to really understand Ramesses, you kind of have to wrap your head around a man whose self-assurance was so legendary, he was having statues of himself built every 5 minutes. He covered his entire empire with his own face. And it wasn't just simple vanity. It was a very calculated projection of ultimate, unshakable power. This is the guy forever known as the pharaoh who refused to lose. He wasn't just some administrator managing grain taxes. Actually, scratch that. He didn't care about the mundane stuff at all. He was an ancient powerhouse. He operated with unmatched confidence in literally every room he walked into. Defeat just wasn't a concept that applied to him. He was a living god, and trust me, he made sure everybody knew it.
Section 2. The Battle of Kadesh.
Now, it's pretty easy to have unshakable confidence when you're chilling in a palace, right? But around 1274 BC, that confidence was seriously put to the test. Egypt's biggest, most terrifying enemies, the Hittites, were on the march. To put it in modern terms, they were absolutely ready for smoke. Ramses is asked how many enemies are coming, and his answer is essentially just yes. What followed was the famous Battle of Kadesh. The scale of this was terrifying. We are talking thousands of soldiers, hundreds of war chariots, just utter chaos. When the Egyptian scouts came back to camp, they were physically shaking. They told Ramses the enemy army was literally everywhere. The Egyptian ranks just dissolved into massive panic, soldiers screaming that they were completely finished. It was a totally dire situation.
So, how does our incredibly confident pharaoh react? Well, Ramses goes full action hero. Instead of calling for a retreat or a tactical withdrawal, the legend says he charged directly into the enemy lines like a man who completely forgot that fear was a real thing. He fought like a video game final boss, practically screaming, "You get an arrow, you get an arrow. Everybody gets an arrow." The Hittite soldiers were just left totally panicked, wondering how this one guy was single-handedly tearing through their front lines.
Section 3. The Ancient Propaganda Machine. Because, look, fighting the battle is really only half the job. What you do after the dust settles, that's what cements your place in history. And Ramses was about to drop an ancient public relations masterclass that modern PR firms would be incredibly jealous of. Which brings us to a really fascinating question. Who actually won the Battle of Kadesh? If you ask historians today, they will fiercely debate this. Some say it was a tactical draw. Others think both sides took such massive losses that nobody really won anything. But if you asked Ramses, oh man, Ramses had absolutely no doubts whatsoever about who took home the trophy.
There's just a massive gap here. You've got the historical consensus of a messy, bloody draw on one side, and then you have Ramses' official version on the other. He explicitly ordered his royal scribes to record a very different narrative. He dictated that he, Ramses II, single-handedly annihilated the enemy forces. He didn't just win, he was the literal sole reason they survived. He carved his own superhero origin story straight into stone. Now, 6 feet, that was Ramses' actual physical height. And to put that into perspective, for ancient Egypt, being a 6-foot-tall guy meant you were genuinely a towering giant compared to the average person. But for Ramses, yeah, being a literal giant just wasn't enough. When he was reviewing the wall carvings with his scribes, he demanded they draw him even taller. His ego absolutely required that he wasn't just the tallest man in the room, but this impossible towering colossus. And this translated into what we can only really call Egypt's monumental flexes. After the war, Ramses didn't just, post the ancient equivalent of a selfie and move on. He kicked off one of the biggest building booms in human history. He built these colossal temples, unbelievably huge statues, entire cities that served basically one main purpose: physically cementing his wildly exaggerated legacy all over the empire.
Every single stone was screaming, "Look how awesome I am."
Section 4. The First Peace Treaty.
Eventually, though, reality has to set in, right? Decades of posturing and border skirmishes took a heavy toll, and the endless bloodshed really drained both of these ancient superpowers. Their war machines were just exhausted. And this shared exhaustion actually led to a monumental moment. The Hittite king finally reached out and basically asked to just stop all the killing. Ramses agreed, and together they signed one of the very first recorded peace treaties in all of human history. It's a hugely significant diplomatic agreement, and it proves that even the most war-hungry, supremely confident rulers eventually figure out the pragmatic need for peace.
But here is the brilliant catch. Even when he's making a concession, even when he is actively agreeing to lay down his weapons and sign a peace treaty, Ramses' attitude essentially boiled down to, fine, but my version of the story goes on the walls. He made absolutely sure he retained total control over how the history of this conflict was going to be recorded. He gets his peace, sure, but he also gets the ultimate victory in the history books.
Section 5. Master of the Narrative. Fast forward a few thousand years later, and we can see exactly how brilliantly successful this ancient branding strategy actually was. Ramses didn't just rule a physical empire, he ruled the very concept of his own memory. His surviving legacy is exactly what he demanded it to be: a fierce warrior king, an absolute master of propaganda, and, without a doubt, the most confident man in ancient history. He manufactured a reality that lasted for millennia. He explicitly wanted history to remember him looking as cool and powerful as humanly possible, and by carving that image deep into the bedrock, he made sure we had absolutely no choice but to see him that way. Ultimately, Ramesses proves that ancient Egypt was so much more than just static tombs and silent pyramids. It was this incredibly dynamic, complex web of cutthroat politics, brutal war, and the sheer, undeniable power of controlling the narrative. Ramses used his unlimited confidence not just to intimidate the enemies of his own time, but to literally intimidate time itself. And that leaves us with a really fascinating, provocative question to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. If you had the ultimate power to carve your own history onto the walls for all of eternity, knowing nobody could ever erase it, how much of it would be the strict truth, and how much of it would be pure, unfiltered PR? It's a deep question about history, the human ego, and the stories we deliberately choose to leave behind. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the sands of time. Keep questioning the walls around you, and keep learning.